The Napoleonic Wars gave us many heroes, but very few have endured in popular memory quite like Horatio Hornblower and Richard Sharpe. Two men shaped by the worlds they came from, only to prove to themselves, as much as to others, the quality of their character. One rises through the ranks through sheer determination and grit, fighting not only the enemy, but the system around him. The other advances through intellect and endurance, steadily building a reputation as a formidable naval commander. Both men are brave, both men are driven, and both are held back at times by the very traits that make them strong. One thing is for certain, they survive situations no ordinary person would. Though in Sean Bean's case, it seems he used up all 9 lives during his time as Sharpe. So, Hornblower versus Sharpe, a naval hero versus a battlefield legend, an analytical thinker versus an instinctive fighter, restraint versus defiance, calculation versus conviction. 2 leaders, 2 styles. The question is simple. Which one would you follow? Before we examine who Hornblower and Sharpe are within their stories, we first need to look back at how they were created. Both are products of their authors, and the kind of British hero each writer wanted to explore. Writing in the shadow of the First World War on the brink of the Second, Horatio Hornblower was created by C.S. Forester, first appearing in 1937 with A Happy Return. Forester was largely inspired by the real-life Horatio Nelson, as well as others like Lord Cochrane and Sir George Cockburn. Forester was also inspired by an old copy of the Naval Chronicle, where the actions of the Royal Navy at the time provided much of the material for Hornblower's fictional adventures. The real name Horatio was inspired by the character in William Shakespeare's Hamlet, but also because of Forester's fondness with the legendary Lord Nelson. The surname Hornblower comes from Arthur Hornblow, a Hollywood producer who was a colleague and friend of Forester's. From this, we ended up getting 11 Hornblower novels, which led to numerous radio adaptations and screen adaptations, perhaps the most popular being the 1951 film starring Gregory Peck, and the 1998 to 2003 series on ITV starring Ioan Griffith. Sharpe, on the other hand, was a creation of Bernard Cornwell, with his first novel appearance being in 1981's Sharpe's Eagle. Cornwell himself was a big fan of Hornblower's novels, and because he was unable to find an equivalent land-based character, created one himself. Struggling to come up with a name as iconic as Horatio Hornblower, he used a placeholder based on the rugby union player Richard Sharpe, and eventually he kept it, just adding an E. Cornwell had also intended to write only 11 novels, the same number as in the Hornblower series, ending with Sharpe's Waterloo, but later changed his mind due to the popularity of the series. As such, to this date, we have been blessed with 24 novels, some short stories, and of course the incredible ITV series starring Sean Bean from 1993 to 2006. Both Hornblower and Sharpe fight the same war, yet their social and class background couldn't be more different. Richard Sharpe begins life at the very bottom of society. Sharpe was born on the 23rd of June 1777 to a mother who was a prostitute and a father who, according to Cornwell on his website, was a French smuggler. First in a foundling home, until eventually leaving for Yorkshire, where he worked in a tavern. It is important to note that for the poor and working class, life was grim. Most of the time, families lived hand to mouth, and many workers lived in small, damp and often infested row houses or overcrowded tenements, sometimes referred to as doss houses. Clean water was a luxury, and many relied on shared, often filthy pumps in the street. Stoves were expensive, making it difficult for many to cook hot meals. All these factors caused death at a young age, being a frequent occurrence. Working hours were long, 12 to 18 hours in some cases, and conditions were frequently dangerous, causing respiratory issues, especially in the mines. And despite early factory acts, children still worked in factories, mines, and as chimney sweeps or agricultural labourers. So as you can see, life was not great for the poor, meaning the allure of joining the army to escape the life of complete poverty was an attractive proposition. Now, the British Army of the late 18th and 19th centuries, however, was not a meritocracy. Generally, commissions were purchased, gentlemen became officers, and the poor just became cannon fodder. On the other side of the spectrum, you have Horatio Hornblower, who was born on the 4th of July 1776 to a somewhat modest middle-class family in Hythe, Kent. This would have made him around a year older than Sharpe. Now, Hornblower certainly wasn't an aristocrat, or from that kind of family. He was the son of a doctor, and was given a classical education. All this meant he was well versed in Greek and Latin. He was also tutored in French by a penniless French émigré, and had an aptitude for mathematics. His shy and reserved nature made him always doubt his decisions, but his analytical mind made him a perfect candidate for the Navy. Life was different for both characters. One was raised poor and the other modest, yet these social backgrounds should never define someone's qualities or character. Usually, it is always about the company you keep and the moral compass one has. And for both of these characters, luckily, their morals were very high. Both characters may have grown up in a separate world, but they are similar in numerous ways. They are courageous, resilient, and honourable, but the way those qualities manifest could not be more different. Richard Sharpe is fundamentally instinct-driven. Throughout Bernard Cornwell's novels and the TV series, he reacts quickly, often physically running towards danger without a second's thought. He is also a fiercely ambitious man, rising through the ranks by courage, determination, and just a spot of luck. This does not mean, however, he is reckless. Sharpe is tactically aware, particularly in skirmish warfare. He understands terrain, timing, and morale can win battles. He reads men well, especially soldiers, because, well, he is one. Meaning as well that he can't be fooled easily by the tricks of the ranks. He is also cunning and has a wicked sense of humour, making jokes and insults to people at various times.
Very consistent, Lieutenant. 10 salvos and you've missed every time.
He does it not only out of humour, but also to fool others, particularly those upper-class generals who look down on him so. On the battlefield, he is assured, formidable, driven by instinct, and tactically imaginative. Away from combat, however, he is somewhat insecure. He is often seen as being socially awkward or slightly out of place, never entirely comfortable among the well-educated officers who surround him. Horatio Hornblower, by contrast, is incredibly introspective. From his earliest appearances in the novels and TV show, C.S. Forester makes his internal monologue central to the narrative. We are constantly aware of Hornblower's thoughts, his calculations, his anxieties, and his self-recriminations. Where Sharpe is very much instinct first, Hornblower is more analytical in the face of danger. Hornblower's intellect is his greatest weapon. He can assess a situation and generally come to a reasonable outcome, an outcome that would generally benefit the mission. He reads situations well, and can inspire loyalty from his men, not because he is in command, but because his actions have gained their trust. But the brilliance of Forester's writing lies in pairing that intellect with crippling self-doubt. Hornblower frequently assumes he has performed poorly, even when others view him as heroic. After victories, he worries he has been lucky. After difficult decisions, he replays them privately time and time again. This battle is something that he fights constantly, but it is what makes him such an incredible leader. He doesn't rest on his laurels. He wants to do better and be better, because every danger that he faces will be different from the last. Similarly to Sharpe, he is somewhat socially awkward. He often struggles with small talk, he often misreads emotional nuance. And unlike Sharpe, who can just fill space forcefully, Hornblower can often retreat into his own silence. Yet when the time is required for a decisive decision, Hornblower does so, because he has already played out every situation and every outcome inside his head. Now you may be listening to this and thinking, well, there are very few similarities between the two, but there are. The first I would argue would be their intelligence in their respective fields. Whether it be the Navy or Army, both are highly gifted and respected. Sharpe is often always the first man Wellington or one of his exploring officers will choose for a mission. That is because he is reliable and gets things done. Whether it's infiltrating fortresses or rescuing prisoners, those above Sharpe know what he can do. The same can be said for Hornblower. Pellew saw his talents early on, as such trusts him to take command of captured merchant vessels and do reconnaissance on the French coast. Each key figure in a position of power, whether it is Wellington or Pellew, trusts in both characters' abilities. Next, I would argue, is their uncompromising belief in honour. Now, Sharpe may bend the rules, challenge his superiors or defy convention, but he does not tolerate cowardice or betrayal. His sense of honour is personal, and he expects those he commands to uphold these values. Such is in Sharpe's Eagle when he fights for Josephina Lacosta's honour against Gibbons and Berry. Hornblower's honour is very much tied to duty. He feels deeply the weight of responsibility placed upon him. He is tormented by the idea of failing his crew or staining his reputation. Even when no one else would question his actions, he questions them himself. They are also both fiercely protective of those under their command. Now, Sharpe did start out rough with his chosen men. In fact, Harper was planning on killing Sharpe to begin with, but through his actions he gained their trust, even though he wasn't a proper officer.
I'll never make a proper sergeant, sir.
So? I'll never make a proper officer.
Indeed you will, sir. You'll make a grand killing officer.
This trust and respect went both ways. Sharpe never asked his men to do something that he couldn't do himself. He would lead his men from the front in every battle, and he would mourn each of their losses as if they were his own flesh and blood. As per the novel Sharpe's Gold, Sharpe marvelled at the confidence of his men. He did not understand, as Patrick Harper did, that it was because of him. The impossible was just a little troublesome, and that victory was a commonplace where he led. And this is just like Hornblower, who also had a rocky start with his men, but again through merit and action proved himself to those who doubted him. Hornblower, just like Sharpe, would lead from the front, and his men would follow. All this for me is why, yes, they are different, but they are also two sides of the same coin. Both Sharpe and Hornblower entered the British Armed Forces relatively young. Sharpe is around 16 when he takes the King's Shilling, partly to escape arrest after killing a man, whereas Hornblower joins the Royal Navy at 17 as a midshipman. From the beginning, their entry points, however, could not be more different. Sharpe joins the 33rd Regiment of Foot as a private soldier. Hornblower enters the Navy as a gentleman officer in training. One begins at the bottom of the ladder, the other steps onto it halfway up. Looking at Sharpe's early career, it first took him to Flanders, where he experiences his first taste of real battle at Boxtel. A year later, he is sent to India, and it is here that his rivalry with Sergeant Obadiah Hakeswell intensifies, and where his resilience is tested brutally. In India, we follow the events of Sharpe in the novels Sharpe's Tiger, Sharpe's Triumph, and Sharpe's Fortress, where he proves himself as a capable soldier in espionage, staying calm under pressure, adapting to every situation, and executing dangerous orders without hesitation. These qualities enable him to rise through the ranks, ending up being given a field commission to ensign after saving Sir Arthur Wellesley's life at the Battle of Assaye. Yet he became frustrated after being constantly looked down on by his fellow officers, and resented by the soldiers he commanded, which is a bit of a common upcoming theme for Sharpe. All of this leads him to join the 95th Rifles. Hornblower's early career unfolds differently, but with similar themes. Horatio Hornblower enters the Royal Navy at 17, joining the HMS Justinian in 1793. Unlike Sharpe, he does not begin at the bottom of the social hierarchy, but he is nevertheless deeply insecure within it. Educated and technically gifted, he does lack social ease and confidence. His early tests, however, are the opposite to Sharpe. Sharpe was thrusted into military mission. Hornblower's first battle is bullying.
Come on, Snotty!
Targeted by Jack Simpson and debilitated by seasickness, even while the ship lies at anchor, Hornblower experiences acute self-doubt. The psychological pressure becomes so severe that he briefly contemplates suicide before challenging Simpson to a duel. The death of his friend Clayton in that duel permanently reminds Hornblower that every action has consequences, whether they be positive or, in this case, negative. Transferred then to the HMS Indefatigable under Captain Sir Edward Pellew, Hornblower is immediately placed under scrutiny. Pellew, angered by the circumstances of the duel, promotes him to command Simpson's former division. The appointment is less a reward than a deliberate test. Hornblower must impose authority on men who associate him with weakness. He, however, succeeds, not through intimidation, but through disciplined fairness. He refuses to tolerate the laxity that Simpson encouraged, yet he demonstrates concern for his men's safety and performance. It is a true test that Hornblower succeeds in. Now, this is not too dissimilar to Sharpe's first test in the TV adaptation of Sharpe's Rifles. Now, there is a difference between the novels and the TV adaptation. Sharpe's Rifles has Sharpe promoted after he saves Wellesley's life in Portugal, rather than in India. The reward is a dangerous mission that leads him to try and gain the trust of the chosen men. Men who are at first distrustful, and in Harper's case, insubordinate.
You Irish scum.
Sharpe certainly, to start with, doesn't exactly know how to command without being, well, a bit of a dick.
Get this old court moving! Look alive, boy!
Yet he listens to advice from Teresa and Vivar, as well as actually getting to know the men he leads. By doing this, he ends up gaining the trust and respect from these men. These two arcs are essentially the same, both men learning on the go how to command. And certainly when I look at the TV versions of the Even Chance and Sharpe's Rifles, I always look at them as the perfect ways of introducing a character. We watch them grow through trials and tribulations, all ending with them becoming more assured and confident for future stories. Once Sharpe and Hornblower had proven themselves worthy of command, the distinction between them becomes about how they lead going forward. Both are capable leaders, both have inspired loyalty, both operate effectively under pressure. The difference now lies in how they exercise their authority. Sharpe, for example, is very much a man's man. He has a very physical and visible presence amongst his men, showing that he is not only one of them, but that he will happily go through the same dangers that they go through. We can see this in every novel and TV episode. He leads from the front. For example, the Battle of Talavera, where he is there steadying the men, charging into battle.
Stand!
And the same goes for his battles at Badajov, Salamanca, Vittoria, the list goes on. He isn't a backseat general that throws men at the enemy, all while sipping tea safely from behind the lines. No, of course not. He is amongst it all. And this is not merely stylistic, it is essential for his credibility. As a former rank and file soldier, his legitimacy depends upon demonstrating that he does not hide behind his rank. He builds loyalty amongst his men through shared hardship. His decision-making is instinctive, but not reckless. Years in the ranks have given him acute battlefield awareness. He reads terrain quickly, recognises when morale is faltering, and adapts without prolonged deliberation. His leadership thrives in fluid environments such as skirmishes, fort breaches, irregular engagements, all forms of combat that he is an expert in. Discipline under Sharpe is a very personal touch, and his men respect him for that. If you fight and work hard for him, there will be no problem, but if you don't, then Sharpe will rip you a new one. And we see this in Sharpe's Gold.
No, sir.
What did you say?
I refuse your orders.
After Sergeant Rod is disrespectful and insubordinate, Sharpe strips him of his rank and brands him a deserter. He didn't do this for the kicks. Rod disobeyed orders and was punished for it. We also see this in Sharpe's Siege, where Robinson is caught frolicking about with a French girl. Sharpe initially suspects rape, so must punish him accordingly, as he is bound by the law of Wellington.
I'm sorry, Robinson. You're a brave soldier. If I don't sing you, Wellington will hang me.
Yet, after he is proving innocent, Sharpe still needs to prove a point. So he asks Harper to give him a beating instead.
Teach him he does not make free with the French girls. Sir!
A nice little reminder for him to think with your head, not your penis. Having said that, he is incredibly loyal to his men and will protect them if necessary, such as in Sharpe's Gold, where Lieutenant Ayres originally tries to arrest and hang Skillicorn for stealing a chicken.
He's a looter. Hang him!
Sharpe takes a risk, as he would with any of his men, insisting that he will deal with it.
Oh, you stupid bastard!
However, in this instance, he was unsuccessful, and Skillicorn was hanged. But the point remains, the chosen men and anyone under his command are essentially his family. One of Sharpe's most impressive leadership qualities is that he is incorruptible. Time and time again, Sharpe could have taken shortcuts, yet his own personal code of honour ensures he will always do the right thing for himself and his men. Now at times he may lose his temper and end up doing things that aren't entirely correct, but he will always learn from these mistakes. And that is what makes him a better leader than most in the British Army at the time. Hornblower's leadership, by contrast, is constructed through discipline, restraint, and intellectual control. There is a clear difference in how an army and navy officer must present their authority. Naval command demands distance, and a captain cannot afford emotional volatility. From his earliest command responsibilities, Hornblower understands that composure is a big part of leadership. In the Even Chance, for example, when Lieutenant Eccleston dies and Simpson attempts to assert seniority, Hornblower does not argue emotionally or physically. He asserts formal authority and orders Simpson detained.
Mr. Bowles, you will carry out my orders. If Mr. Simpson resists, you have my permission to shoot him.
Mr. Bowles, aware that Hornblower is in the right, carries out the order, not only because he heard Eccleston give Hornblower command, but because Simpson showcased a lack of decency and control. Hornblower, as mentioned, was calm and measured in this situation. This awareness deepens in Mutiny. Faced with Captain Sawyer's deteriorating mental state aboard the HMS Renown, Hornblower recognises that open defiance risks execution for mutiny under the Articles of War. Unlike Sharpe, who might confront incompetence directly, Hornblower calculates legal and political consequences.
Court Martial.
Why? What on earth for?
Well, this is mutiny, Mr. Buckland.
It becomes a balancing act between obedience and preservation. Even when he participates in decisions that edge towards mutiny, he does so cautiously, aware that authority depends on the legitimacy of their actions. Hornblower's tactical style is analytical rather than instinctive. Sharpe is very much a speak first, think later type of guy, whereas Hornblower is very much the opposite. We see this in the examination for Lieutenant. He attempts to temper Bunting's dissent through caution.
I understand that Finch was a close friend. I owed him much, sir. I too was in his debt. And that is why you're not already in irons.
But ultimately enforces punishment when required. Emotionally, Hornblower diverges sharply from Sharpe. He internalises doubt and grief. The death of Clayton in his youth, Kennedy's sacrifice at the court-martial, and the cumulative losses of subordinates remain largely private burdens. Even after promotion to post-captain, his authority is accompanied by introspection rather than outward confidence. It is vital that naval commanders are seen as always being in control of every situation. Any ounce of hesitation or doubt will seep into the men they command. Yet similarities in the leadership styles exist in both men. Both value competence in the men they serve with and for. Hornblower, though born more middle class, is uncomfortable in upper class environments, the same as Sharpe. And we can see this from Hornblower's experience in Duchess and the Devil at the beginning.
The Duchess of Forthdale.
Look at the lad. He's like a goose on a green. Any second now he'll be hissing at me.
Sorry, Your Grace.
Equally with Sharpe, we can see him uncomfortable in the presence of the Prince Regent and other high-class settings.
How'd you do? Eh? Your Majesty.
Did you say A? He said A!
They both like to promote officers they trust. In Hornblower's case, there is Bush. He is reliable and has good character. Sharpe gives responsibilities to the likes of Harper and Fredrickson. Other similarities, such as both rejecting internal corruption, they both protect subordinates when possible, and they both act decisively when required. All these qualities showcase real leadership in both men. By the time Sharpe and Hornblower reach the height of their careers, both have accumulated reputations for competence and courage. Yet neither man's trajectory is linear. Their greatest triumphs often sit uncomfortably close to their most painful setbacks, and the way they respond to each reveals the core of their leadership styles. Looking at Sharpe first, his career highs and lows are mixed. In Sharpe's Eagle, the episode is structurally significant. It proves to Wellesley that Sharpe is a man that he can trust to succeed in dangerous missions. His bravery in attempting to rescue the ambushed forces at Val de la Casa earn him a captaincy. Then, when the battle at Talavera comes around, not only does he steady the line after Simmerson flees, but he regains the South Essex's honour by capturing the French Imperial Eagle, something that will be a constant reminder to those who at first seek to dismiss him. His achievements and reputation grow throughout demonstrative courage, witnessed by subordinates, superiors, and enemies alike. Sharpe's company represents one of Sharpe's most significant professional peaks. Set during the siege of Badajoz, Sharpe has been denied rightful promotion within the South Essex due to politics of the time. Commissions were bought, and merit was rarely rewarded. However, rather than withdrawing into himself, he reclaims command of his company and leads the assault on the breach. One of the bloodiest battles of the Peninsular War. Badajoz was historically catastrophic in terms of casualties, but Sharpe, leading from the front and surviving, reasserts both his authority and his right to advancement. This episode marks the consolidation of his battlefield credibility. In Sharpe's Enemy, the death of Teresa marks perhaps the most devastating emotional blow of his life. Teresa is not simply a romantic partner, but she was a stable presence in his life. She was the constant outside of the day-to-day battle that gave Sharpe happiness. And the birth of their daughter Antonia also gave Sharpe a longer-term purpose in life. Her murder by Hagueswell collapses all they had. Sharpe initially grieves, but is aware that there is still a job to do. He must defend the fort they had just captured from the French, and it really does show the character of the man who, even though this is perhaps the biggest loss of his life so far, he can still perform his duty and win. Yet loss is not the only low point in his career. In Sharpe's honour, Sharpe is falsely accused of murder. He is charged and sentenced to hang, even though we all know he didn't commit the crime. Reputation is a big part of Sharpe's life, and the loss of his honour is a blow. Yet through stubbornness and pure willpower, he is able to find the actual culprits. Now, if you remember, we had previously looked at the relationship between him and his men, and how this started rough. Yet because of previous missions and success prior to the events of Sharpe's honour, they were prepared to fight their way to rescue him, an act which would have led to severe consequences. But this shows not just the growth and respect they had for him as a leader, they saw him as a brother. Sharpe's regiment is another good example of a career high point, especially as Sharpe gained success outside of regular combat. Returning to England, he uncovers systemic corruption within the South Essex's recruiting structure. Men are being siphoned away for profit, weakening the regiment in Spain. Sharpe dismantles this scheme, exposing aristocratic rot within the army itself. This is an important victory for Sharpe, as it shows that he values honour and justice not just in the battlefield setting, but outside of it, proving that his morals and principles can't be bought. In Sharpe's revenge, the portrayal of Jane cuts even deeper. Unlike Teresa's death, which comes through violence, Jane's betrayal is calculated. She steals his fortune and abandons him, undermining him socially and economically. This wound is something he endures through Sharpe's justice and Waterloo. Yet by the end of Sharpe's revenge, he has at least some comfort in meeting the woman who remains with him until his death, Lucille. Sharpe's Waterloo represents the culmination of his military arc. By 1815, Sharpe is no longer an outsider struggling for acceptance. He is a veteran officer with seasoned authority. Yet even though he is in a position of power, he still must contend with incompetence from within, particularly from the Prince of Orange.
Well, you won't learn from him. He's not with a silk stocking full of shit.
Who, through naivety and stupidity in battle, costs the lives of many men, including the very tragic loss of Harrison Hagman. Through this low point of his story, it causes him to attempt to assassinate the prince, a hangable act if caught. Yet because of his earlier exploits in saving the garrison at La Sainte, Macduff looks away. An important decision that shows that even men that briefly know Sharpe are aware of his qualities as a soldier and a person. Yet all this ends with ultimate success for Sharpe. Wellington gives him command of the final push against Napoleon, a reward for the many years of blood, sweat and tears he endured for the Duke. Sharpe's career therefore oscillates. Professionally, he climbs rank steadily, his authority strengthens with every experience, and his men's loyalty deepens. Personally, however, stability repeatedly fractures. Teresa's death, Jane's betrayal, false accusations all remind Sharpe to stay grounded and never take things for granted. His character growth with all these highs and lows create a character fully developed and one that we as fans can enjoy reading and watching. Hornblower also certainly has his fair share of highs and lows. Now, we have already looked at his early success in surviving the early days as a midshipman, from being a bullied seasick newbie to a brave and honourable junior officer. In the examination for lieutenant, Hornblower's promotion depends on his success in an exam, something he stresses over day and night. Simultaneously, Spain's realignment with France introduces logistical strain, half rations, and rising tension among the crew. Hornblower's leadership is tested in managing discipline amongst these issues. His handling of Bunting in a tough manner showcases his firm but fair leadership, and when ordered to lead Bunting through the gauntlet, he is forced to witness physical consequences. His later decision to grant Bunting a second chance aboard the quarantine schooner Caroline reflects his pragmatism in the situation they are in. However, Bunting's eventual death at Hornblower's hand feels like a personal and professional low point for him. He had hoped that the firm but fair treatment he gave Bunting would have been enough to have changed his attitude. But ultimately, some people can't be helped.
I believe your duty is fulfilled, sir.
The fireship incident at Gibraltar provides a pivotal high point. When his examination falters, Hornblower volunteers to board and redirect a Spanish fireship threatening the fleet. And even though he struggled under the pressures of the exam, his calmness under pressure in a real-life dangerous situation proved more than enough evidence that Hornblower was ready for promotion. Later arcs deepen both his achievements and vulnerabilities. The Duchess and the Devil, for example, we have both high and low points. After being captured and imprisoned with his men, he struggles to control Mr. Hunter, who wants to escape as quickly as possible, while Hornblower wanted to wait for Kennedy's recovery before an attempt. And after he takes responsibility after an unsuccessful escape by Hunter, he is sent to the pit. This struggle proves to Hunter and the rest of the imprisoned crew that he will take any punishment to protect his men. He later proves his honour and ability after witnessing a storm that founders the Almeria. Hornblower volunteers himself and his crew to brave the rough seas and rescue those aboard the ship, pledging his word of honour that they will return to prison. Alfredo consents, and even a contrite Hunter insists of taking part, though his wound had not fully healed. Hornblower and his crew save the Duchess and the injured captain of the Almeria, but it ultimately leads to Hunter's death. And Hornblower, being a man of his word, returns to prison with his men. Yet because of his honour and exploits in saving the captain of the Almeria, the King and Queen of Spain order them released in recognition of their gallantry, and they are permitted to return home. In The Frogs and the Lobsters, he suffers a low point after witnessing the death of Mariette. Throughout, he protects her from the Marquise and royalist French troops. He witnesses their mistreatment towards the locals, something that he personally finds abhorrent. And at the end, when he attempts to escape with Mariette after the French royalist forces are surrounded and defeated, she sadly gets shot and dies in Hornblower's arms. This loss is not the usual defeat in battle, but he feels like a failure, unable to save someone who he felt connected to on a personal and emotional level. We then have the two-part arc of Mutiny and Retribution, which represents both one of Hornblower's lowest professional moments and one of his most significant consolidations of authority. Serving under the increasingly unstable Captain Sawyer aboard the HMS Renown, Hornblower is placed in an impossible position. Continued obedience risks disaster, yet the alternative risks Hornblower's execution under the Articles of War. Sawyer's paranoia escalates into irrational punishments and accusations, culminating in his fall into the hold, and the subsequent charge of mutiny against Hornblower and the other lieutenants. The court-martial that follows exposed the fragility of naval careers within rigid hierarchies, especially where blame must be assigned. Hornblower's survival in this situation depends not only on his own conduct, but on Kennedy's sacrificial confession, leaving him professionally preserved, but morally burdened. Yet within the same campaign, Hornblower demonstrates the qualities that justify his advancement. At Santo Domingo, he executes a daring kedging manoeuvre to free the grounded Renown under heavy fire, then leads a tactical infiltration of a Spanish fort through underground tunnels, turning potential catastrophe into a strategic victory. His use of hotshot to disable enemy ships further highlights his capacity for ingenuity. These actions lead directly to his promotion to captain. This arc therefore encapsulates the core of Hornblower's character. In Loyalty, now commanding the HMS Hotspur, he uncovers treachery within the Royal Navy itself, exposing Wolfe's espionage network and the planned ambush of the British fleet. His destruction of the semaphore station and fort prevents catastrophic loss and demonstrates Hornblower's strategic intelligence. The episode also forces him into morally complex territory. His decision to record Captain Hammond's death as honourable, rather than traitorous, reveals his awareness that preserving morale and national unity during times of war are of the utmost importance. In duty, Hornblower faces a different form of pressure. Discovering Jerome Bonaparte aboard the Hotspur, he balances the political to the operational aspect. So with his decision to continue reconnaissance rather than immediate return to England proves Hornblower cares not for immediate advancement. He could have easily sailed straight back and be rewarded for capturing such a strategically valuable figure, yet he decides to continue with his mission. And when he later navigates through dense fog to intercept and disable French frigates intended for invasion, his calculated boldness confirms his maturity and strategic brilliance. The subsequent promotion to post captain is a reward not just for Hornblower, but for us as a viewer. We have gone through the journey with Horatio, which is why this moment feels completely earned. Taken together, the careers of Sharpe and Hornblower reveal two distinctive trajectories, shaped by the same war. Sharpe rises through the ranks because of his bravery and no-nonsense attitude, yet he always has to fight for his legitimacy against the class system of the British Army. Hornblower's ascent, by contrast, is marked by gradual integration and increased responsibility. His promotions reflect cumulative trust rather than dramatic redemption, as perhaps seen in Sharpe's case. Yet each advancement deepens the private burden he carries. Where Sharpe fights to prove he belongs, Hornblower struggles to convince himself he deserves his place. Both men achieve senior command within Britain's defining conflict, but they arrive there differently. One thing is for sure, with Sharpe on land and Hornblower on the sea, it is no surprise as to why countless victories were achieved. By this point, both Sharpe and Hornblower have proven themselves capable leaders in the Napoleonic Wars and beyond. The question now is no longer whether they can lead, it is what kind of leadership is most effective and under what conditions. Sharpe's strengths are quite transparent. He inspires loyalty through the shared hardships with his men and courage in his actions. People follow him because they have seen him stand side by side with them in every battle. He defends them against incompetent officers and enemies alike, and he fights without hesitation. His authority is reinforced by a very real moral code. He despises corruption and prefers to reward merit over class privilege. In the chaos of the battlefield, his adaptability and instinctive decision-making are formidable assets. As such, whenever Sharpe takes the field, the morale of the men around him increases. Yet, Sharpe's leadership has limitations. His temper can cloud his judgment.
Are you Sharpe? I'm the man who'll turn your arse if you don't learn some manners.
His personal involvement in disputes sometimes escalates conflict rather than diffuses it. He essentially at times is his very own worst enemy. In periods of war and conflict, he is in his element. Yet, take him out of that environment, he suffers. Hornblower's strengths lie in calculation and structural stability. He commands with composure, processes complexity rapidly, and considers long-term consequences. Naval warfare demands coordination across crews, ships and fleets, and Hornblower's analytical mind excels in that environment. He is capable of balancing morality with necessity, preserving cohesion even when his own personal conscience is tested. However, Hornblower's introspection converges on hesitation. His self-doubt, though often invisible to his crew, weighs heavily on him. His emotional restraint may create distance between himself and his men, or in the case of the episode Duty, we see this emotional distance causes issues with Maria, his wife. But if we are being honest, he only really married her out of pity, not love. I think when we look at who is the better leader, we have to look at different variables. In the chaotic close-quartered combat, Sharpe for me is more dominant. Land warfare in the Peninsular War is messy, fragmented, and often decided by the morale of men. Sharpe thrives in those environments. In Sharpe's Eagle and Sharpe's Company, he turns collapsing situations into victory through his audacity and personal visibility. Hornblower, while brave and capable in combat, I would say operates more effectively within coordinated systems. Ship engagements demand patience and timing. In sudden emotionally charged chaos, Sharpe's temperament is more naturally suited. In long-term strategic operations, Hornblower has the advantage. Naval warfare, for example, requires patience, endurance and logistical foresight. Blockades, convoy protection, reconnaissance, these are all sustained operations. Hornblower's analytical temperament allows him to maintain discipline over weeks or months at sea. Sharpe is an exceptional battlefield commander, but prolonged planning and manoeuvring is not really his natural habitat. Hornblower thrives in this environment. Let's also look at managing crises. When command structures falter, as seen in Mutiny and Retribution, Hornblower demonstrates a clear understanding of legal and political ramifications. His restraint and objective thinking ensure that every decision is thoroughly considered. Sharpe tends to confront issues and corruption in a blunt, head-on approach. In Sharpe's regiment, that directness works, but generally, his approach might escalate rather than stabilise the situation, as seen in Sharpe's Honour. So, for me, Hornblower has an advantage here. Morale is an interesting one, as every situation is different. Sharpe's natural charisma and fighting attitude generally can rebuild morale of broken men. We see this in Sharpe's Eagle, Company and Waterloo to name a few examples. Now Hornblower usually tries to keep morale high by being restrained and calm. He isn't overly charismatic, but can certainly lead men in times of battle. And we do see this. So this is very much a situational thing, as I mentioned. Both have their own ways of fixing morale, and both can work. When it comes to loyalty, I would argue that Sharpe's men are almost devoted to him in a different way to Hornblower. Because Sharpe has charisma and leads every battle from the front, they know he puts his body on the line for them, risking it all for victory. And from Sharpe's rivals onward, his authority is reinforced by visible sacrifice. Sharpe has formed a brotherhood of soldiers of sorts. They are family, and Sharpe treats them as such. Hornblower has men devoted to him, yet it comes down to more of a healthy respect rather than brotherly love. Stars and Matthews, his longest known crewman, will follow him and never doubt his decisions. Bush is perhaps one that we would consider his closest friend, but not in the Sharpe Harper sense, I feel. Perhaps if ITV did more Hornblower episodes, we could have seen even more examples of the loyalty he inspires. So who is the better leader? Ultimately, I feel it is a subjective question. Hornblower's leadership is perhaps steadier than Sharpe, but perhaps less inspirational in the flamboyant sense. Sharpe is at his strongest when bravery and courage on the battlefield needs to be seen. Hornblower is at his strongest when judgment must be trusted. So whatever your preference in a leader is, I suppose is the answer. For me, personally, I have to edge it to Sharpe. However, that isn't to say if you prefer Hornblower that you are wrong. They are very different leaders. Each have their strengths and weaknesses, but both are unquestionably legendary. The legacy of Richard Sharpe and Horatio Hornblower extends beyond their individual campaigns. Both characters have come to represent distinct models of British military heroism, shaped by different storytelling and different visions of leadership. Sharpe's legacy is that of a self-made soldier. Created by Bernard Cornwell and brought to life on screen by Sean Bean, Sharpe became a defining image of a soldier in the Napoleonic Wars. The ITV adaptation in the 1990s introduced a generation to the Peninsular War through a character who felt grounded and tangible. Sharpe represents that grit and manliness that many could relate to. He was a working class protagonist who forces people to acknowledge his worth. His presence at Talavera, Badajov and Waterloo embeds him in some of the most mythologized victories. Hornblower's legacy is older in literary origin, but equally significant. C.S. Forester's creation influenced an entire tradition of naval fiction, including later works such as Patrick O'Brien's Aubrey Maturin series. Hornblower embodies a different strand of British heroism. Intellectual, restrained, duty-bound, is almost your classic ideals for a British war hero. On screen, the ITV adaptation presented Hornblower as introspective and complex, emphasising psychological realism over flamboyant heroics. He reflects the Romantic era ideal of the solitary officer, privately uncertain yet publicly resolute. Where Sharpe represents the soldier who fights upward, Hornblower represents the officer who shoulders responsibility inward. Culturally, both characters shaped how audiences understand the Napoleonic Wars. They have enduring appeal that even to this day, old fans and new fans alike can enjoy. And perhaps that is their ultimate legacy. Not that one eclipses the other, but that together they define two enduring visions of heroism in war. So, Hornblower and Sharpe, two leaders, two heroes, and two legends. Who would you follow? Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed. These videos take a long time to make, so please do like, share, comment and subscribe to help the channel grow. And don't forget to hit the notification button to keep up to date with my latest content. Thanks again, and I'll see you over the hills, seas, and far away.